I'm your host, Doreen Steenland, and today I'd like to welcome our guest, Staci Danford. Since you're about gratitude, let's just dive right in and talk about what is gratitude and what are some of the misconceptions that we have with the concept of gratitude.
Okay, that's my favorite question because gratitude is not saying thank you. And it's such a powerful topic and people talk about it everywhere and well-meaning people, give advice about gratitude and tell you to make lists of 20 things or 100 things and all that. I'm sure they have good intentions, but that's not what scientific gratitude is. That's not the kind of gratitude that can change your brain. So in my own personal research study, that's what my graduate study was about, is gratitude and how it impacts the human brain. And I found that 88% of the people think they're grateful, when actually only 4% are scientifically grateful. That's a huge difference in percentages. So I knew something was up. So that's where I began to dig deeper in how we are taught to be grateful. And especially, here in the South, we confuse gratitude with good manners and, saying thank you and writing thank you notes. And all those things are wonderful and they don't hurt anybody, but they're not giving you the benefits that your brain needs. So to get that kind of gratitude, there's got to be some emotion and some feeling involved. And so you can take anything that you're grateful for, like let's say Starbucks coffee. And how many thousand times have we all driven through the drive-through, and said, thank you, and then just gone on our way. And we think we're being grateful. But if we don't understand why we are grateful, so there's 3 layers, and I call it to be awed by gratitude. So if you think about the acronym AWE, A-W-E, A is just the first acknowledgement. So that's acknowledge, thank you for my coffee. Then the W stands for why. Why am I grateful? And that's where people have to really stop and think, oh, why am I grateful for this coffee? But that activates the prefrontal cortex and higher level thinking skills to actually come up with why is it that you're grateful? And so you just take a few seconds and go, oh, thank you for the coffee. I love that you made it exactly to my order and it's so piping hot and I can drink it all the way while I drive to work. That moves your brain to a whole different level. Then if you take the last layer, E, what effect does that have on you? How does this affect me and impact me personally? And I always, that's where you can savor. And I think, oh my gosh, I'm so glad they made it exactly like I want it. Piping hot, 2 shots of espresso, extra vanilla with a shot of cinnamon. And I think, oh my gosh, how lucky am I to live in a place where somebody can just make it to my order while I drive through, while I listen to my favorite podcast. And that helps me move the single thank you for my coffee to a level of gratitude that actually impacts my brain.
Okay, that was huge. So it's not just the thank you.
No.
This is so much deeper. It's actually, from what I'm hearing you say, it's more contemplating.
Yes.
A contemplative state where we're actually processing what is it that I am grateful for, and then sitting in that emotion
and savoring it.
Yeah.
And that's where we just are not taught to savor things, and especially joy and things that are wonderful. We have a great moment, we have a great birthday party, we had a great Christmas celebration or whatever, and then it's over, and we don't teach our brain to hold those memories and savor them. But here's what they have found is joy and happiness is not a threat to your survival. Therefore, it rarely goes over to long-term memory. These are short-term, they come, they go quickly, but danger, sadness, fear, terror, those are a threat to your survival, and those go to long-term memory. That's where our trauma sits. So unless we teach our brain to savor and hold on to it, that's what we need to move it over. And then if we do it every day, it becomes something your brain does automatically. It begins to look for good instead of noticing everything that's bad.
Wow, so good. So, as we're thinking about this gratitude and throwing it in every day,
Yes.
what does that look like? I mean, everybody's busy, right? Everybody's going to
Yes.
say, I'm too busy for this. I'm too busy for this. Um, how does this play out practically?
It's so easy and it takes between 10 and 30 seconds. That's what my whole TED talk was about, is how 30
Okay.
seconds can change your life. Because we think we have to make a list, of 20 things we're grateful for. We have to tell everybody we ever loved how much they changed our life. And those things are great. And if you have time, do them. But if you don't, you can just do it while you're driving down the road. You can do it while you are sitting at a stoplight. You can do it while you're at the drive-through. You can do it while you're in the shower. All you have to do is think about what you're grateful for. So take the acronym AWE. We want our brain to stay in a state of awe. Acknowledge what it is you're grateful for. Well, this morning I did it. I'm so grateful for hot water. Then move to the W. Why? Why? There's so many people in countries all over the world that do not have hot water. E, what effect does this have on me? I can stand here in the morning and feel the warmth. It reminds me of the same warmth of my granny's hugs. And in that instant, I had another set of emotions turn on because I remembered my granny. Took 30 seconds, but I activated chemicals. I activated my hippocampus, which is where memories are. I activated enough activation to last for up to 6 hours in my brain. That's what we want our day to start with, not, oh my gosh, I'm late. Oh gosh, we got to hurry. Oh my gosh, I forgot to pack a lunch, forgot to iron my clothes. That's what we normally do in the morning. Those chemicals also last 6 hours in your brain.
Yes, and we know our brains, as you said earlier, have more of a negativity bias.
Yeah.
It remembers those bad things because it's trying to keep you safe.
Yes.
We need to be intentional about this. And what I love about what you're saying is it's really a simple form of pausing, being intentional, and being mindful.
Yes, it's very similar to a mindful practice.
Yes.
And I love that you said the word intentional, because that's what I talk about with my clients every day is you have to move your brain from automatic to intentional, because our brains are designed to keep us alive. They'll work without you, but it's not going to be your greatest, best life, of course.
Yeah.
But if you want it to be in a functional place where it will move you to your greatest, best life, those are intentional practices. Being fit is an intentional practice. Being healthy is an intentional practice. Being calm is an intentional practice. Our brain doesn't do that automatically. Neither will it do gratitude. You have to do it intentionally.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing you say is that this pathway that leads us to joy and gratitude is totally different than the other pathways in the brain.
Yes. Our brains, if you just sadly, they don't care about you. And I hate to tell people that, but it's very true. Your brain does not care about you personally or your joy, satisfaction. If you graduate, if you have the greatest marriage or the worst marriage, it doesn't care. It cares about speed and safety. And by speed, I mean, it loves to use pathways it's already used. So it doesn't have to go reconnect things. It says, oh, we know what we do when we're upset. We've got a great coping mechanism. We've used it 50 times before. And so when you've used something multiple times, your brain assumes you like it, because that part of the brain doesn't think, but it learns. And it learns you do this every time you're stressed, you must like it, which is why we reach for alcohol. We reach for cigarette. We reach for shopping, whatever it is that your brain loves to use as a coping mechanism, food, cookies, Coke, whatever. That's what it thinks you like to do.
Yeah.
And then safety, when your brain assumes something feels dangerous, whether it's, fear of giving a presentation or, oh my gosh, I'm going to be late for work. I'm afraid I'm going to get fired. It doesn't really have big records of fear. Fear just has a coping system, and your brain's like, oh, we know what to do. We start yelling at people. We start doing all the things. And so we've got to intentionally shift those pathways to something that works better for us, but it's hard. And I would love to tell people it's easy, but it's not. It's not. Your brain loves old pathways. Sadly, most of them are not beneficial for you.
Yes, I love what you said, because I found this to be true with especially those old crutches that we turn to. I call them stress patterns in the work that I do. And those stress patterns are those pathways in our brain that are really wide because we use them all the time. It's like a four-lane highway, right? They go fast and they go furious. But what I love about what you said is that your brain is mislabeling those those stress patterns as good.
Yes. And it
It's
thinks you like them.
yes, because it got that you got that dopamine hit and it worked once, right? You
Yes.
you you used alcohol or whatever or shopping or scrolling, whatever you used to decrease your stress. um, when you went to that thing, it worked momentarily, and your brain says, "Oh, this is good. We have to remember this one."
Yes. Relief
It
pathways.
flags it, right? It's like, "Woo, this is the good one. This one
Yeah.
works. We're going to go there all the time. First stop." And so we have to realize that our brain has mislabeled some things as good that really aren't good for us anymore.
Right.
So
And
that,
we have to intentionally
yes.
tell it that, like, oh, and I use this phrase all the time, and the phrase, of course. And because that kind of calms the shame and the guilt that our brain will intentionally tell us to feel, like, oh my gosh, of course you grabbed the chips and the coffee again, that's what you always do, but then tell it, oh yes, of course I did that, that's an old coping mechanism, I have the ability to change it to something else. And I'll intentionally go lay down, the Lay's potato chips and my Coke and set it down and go, oh yeah, I can choose a healthier option. I can go take a walk. I can drink a big glass of water. My brain just knows that's what I always did first. So apparently I must want to do it again unless I intentionally shift it in another direction. And I really think neuroplasticity is, in my opinion, the greatest discovery of neuroscience in the last 100 years, because most of us, if they're my age, we're taught that your brain just is what it is, and you've killed your brain cells and all the things. We know now for sure that your brain has the capability to change up until the day you die. The problem is change is hard. And it's easier to leave it like it was, but it's not impossible to change it. And I know people from all over the world who have had bad habits for long periods of time or unhealthy thinking who have changed it. And I know in my own life, I did. It is possible. My dad was an alcoholic for 65 years.
Wow.
65 years. And he started asking me questions every day, and he was learning what I was teaching him about his brain. And now he's been sober now for 16 years.
Wow.
And he will tell you that, if I can change, so can anybody. But the difference is he wanted to change. He wasn't doing it for someone else. He wasn't doing it for anybody other than himself. And it was hard. Sometimes it's still hard. But you've got to just tell your brain, oh, of course, that's what I used to do. That's not what I'm choosing to do now. I'm intentionally doing something better, healthier, more beneficial for me.
Yeah, and so I agree with everything you said 100%. I feel like, we get to make a choice in that moment.
Yes.
And sometimes we make a bad choice. And what you're saying is don't condemn yourself. Just
Yeah.
like, of course, this is what your brain wants to do, right? But the more we practice going towards gratitude, the more we practice making these new off ramps in our brain, the more we become aware when those old things come up,
Again,
and we
yes.
can stop it instead of falling into that big wide superhighway.
Yeah. I mean, even this morning, and after 15 years of doing brain work, I still fall prey to old patterns.
Oh yeah.
And when I get stressed and I'm trying to do a bunch of stuff, on my computer, my brain, I don't like details. I like big picture stuff. And if
Yeah.
somebody asks me for a bunch of details, I'm like, ah. And so instantly my trauma response is flight. And I just want to like get out of here. I'm like, oh, I'm gone.
Yeah.
I had my keys and I was in the car before I even realized I had fallen back into an old pattern of this feels uncomfortable. This feels yuck. This feels fearful. Boom, get out. And I was backing out of the driveway and I just put it in park. And I was like, of course, I wanted to escape from that. I don't like details. I can intentionally choose another option. So I pulled back into the driveway and I set the timer for 5 minutes. And I was like, I'm going to do detail work for 5 minutes. And then I'm going to get up and take a break. Well, of course, by the time 5 minutes was over, I was no longer in that pattern. And so I got to finish my work fine. But I had to intentionally stop the pattern that was happening and move it into a new one, even after all these years. And I truly believe we will always have to battle old patterns. I don't think, and I've never met anybody who's just, gotten a new pattern and then magically that's the first choice they pick every time. I don't know anybody. Maybe there is somebody out there. But I think, when people say, oh, when is this going to stop being so hard? And I was like, I don't know that it ever will stop being so hard, but it becomes easier as you do it and you begin to recognize it quicker. I wasn't all the way down the road at Smoothie King before I realized it. I was halfway out of my driveway and I was like, there I go again. But I don't hate myself. I don't feel broken anymore. I lived 40 years of my life feeling broken, like there was something wrong with me. Why do I keep making the same mistakes over and over and over? And now I look, oh, it's not me. It's not me personally. It's a pattern. People are not the problem. Patterns are the problem.
Yes.
But patterns are fixable. And when we stop blaming people for making us mad, for making us frustrated, or ourselves, when we stop blaming ourselves and look at the patterns, it just takes some of the edge off and we realize, oh yeah, I can fix this. Patterns are fixable.
Absolutely. I love what you're saying. You are basically speaking my language. Habits and patterns. We are in this together. And those habits and patterns are no longer useful, right? Those old ones. That's what you're saying. We don't need them anymore. We get to choose. It's not going to be easy, but we can become better at it every day that we practice.
Yeah. And like now, I don't have to tell myself to be grateful anymore. I've been doing it 15 years straight every single day. So now I don't have to wake up in the morning and go, oh yeah, I need to be grateful. It just happens automatically.
Right, because you made a new pattern.
Yes, that has become my most dominant pattern. But in the midst of frustration and anger and doing detail work, that's when I have to really shift it back and go, oh yeah, I could get in a negative spiral really quickly. I don't know why these people have to ask me for so much stuff. Blah, blah. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, Staci, of course you don't like this because it's not your easiest pattern, but how grateful you are that someone wants to know this about you. How can I pause and reframe this and savor the fact that someone needed information from me? Because there's somebody out there in the world that would love for someone to want something from them. But I have to be intentional to make my brain shift the focus because joy is not a threat to my survival.
Oh, yes. I love that. Joy is not a threat to my survival. And it's so interesting because we as humans, we all have those trigger spots, those things that push our buttons. And for you, it's those details, right? It's all those details, all that detail work. And for me, it's numbers. Like you asked me to get my accounting stuff together, and I'm like, oh. So that's when I go back to my old ways, right? Because that's my trigger. So we all have something that we're not quite comfortable with. And when we're not comfortable, we go back to what's familiar.
Yes. And the coping strategy that once worked, your brain's like, oh yeah, remember Lay's potato chips.
Yeah.
They make you feel so much better.
And that ice cream.
Oh. Yeah. And for me, in Texas, we call everything Coke, whether it's Dr. Pepper, 7-Up, whatever, we just call it all Coke. I just so happen to drink actual Coca-Cola. But there's something about the sound of that psh and the fizzy bubbles that I know what they feel like. I know what they're going to taste like. And my brain knows that activates so many senses. And that burn down your throat. I love that feeling. And so I want to gravitate to that. I'm like, oh, I want something to make me feel better because this feels awful. This feels frustrating. This feels anxiety ridden. And so your brain's like, oh, remember, we know what makes you feel better. And then, when you've had 3 Coca-Colas in one day, you're like, is this really making me feel better? Because I'm pretty sure it's doing a massive disservice to my body and my blood sugar. But your brain doesn't care about you. It doesn't care about that. You have to remind it, oh, yes, remember, I have a healthier choice I could use.
So good. It's so funny that you say that. It reminds me of when I was stopping drinking because I've made a decision to change that habit and change my relationship with alcohol. And I remember a time where I just took the glass out, took the bottle of wine out, and started pouring the glass. And I immediately felt the, oh, before I even took a sip.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the alcohol that was calming me down. It was my brain fulfilling the habit loop.
Yes. And there's some great new research about that from Dr. Lieberman. And the book, it's called The Molecule of More. It's one of my favorite books, but it talks very specifically about the difference between wanting and having.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because we used to, matter of fact, I used to teach that the 4 happy chemicals all work together: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And now in his research, he has discovered there is a very different link between the wanting, which is the dopamine, and then the having or the savoring, which is oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And our brain, it actually works on 2 separate areas of the brain. And so we can never get enough wanting. And our brain, once it locks in the dopamine receptors of wanting that made me feel better, that one time it worked, then your brain's like, yeah, we want more, which is what makes sex, drugs, gambling, shopping, alcohol, all those things. There's never enough. Yeah. My dad used to tell me, 1 beer's too many and 20's not enough. His brain just kept wanting more. My personal addiction was with shopping because every time I felt powerless, I would go shopping. But I didn't understand that handing them the credit card, they had to sell me whatever was in my buggy. I felt so powerful. And the more I shopped, the more they treated me like I had power. And it took me years to put the 2 together. And I was like, oh, that's my brains. There's never enough. Half of the time, I didn't even wear what I bought. The clothes were in my closet with the tag on them because I didn't appreciate having it. I just wanted it. And then now after his book, I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. The wanting took over my brain because that's part of the dopamine receptors. And it got me in a frenzy. It's the same way with wanting alcohol, wanting food, wanting sugar. We want it. But half of the time, we'll eat the whole cookie and we're like, did I already eat that? We look down and we're like, I guess I did. We don't enjoy having it. We just get in that frenzy of wanting. So that's where gratitude plays in. I wish I would have known about his research when I was doing mine. But gratitude is about savoring, having. Oh, wow. I don't need more. I can savor what I have. So whether it's patients, clients, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your children, your favorite pair of pants that no longer does it and you want 20 more. I mean, do you ever get enough shoes? Do you ever get enough whatever? But he found that this also is linked to why people have affairs, why they want a new spouse. They're no longer making me happy. They lost the want, but they didn't understand how to savor what they have. It's his research is fascinating.
Interesting. And I have not heard of it. So I am getting that book for sure.
Oh, it's on my top 10 list.
Oh, I've got to get that one. And that's what happened when we got on the phone. We got on the phone and we swapped books of
Yes.
authors that we didn't know. So this is so much fun. Staci, if you had one last thing to leave these people with, what would you tell them?
I would say to beware of the thought thieves. because I think they sneak up on you before you even realize it. And our day can get consumed with all the things we don't like. We don't like the busyness. We don't like the traffic. We don't like the commute. We don't like this person or somebody talked to us rude. And I think it's so important to shift your flashlight, because the data is very clear that there's actually more good things than bad every day. There are more nice people than bad people. There are more wonderful things than catastrophes. But we don't believe that's true because we see more negative than good. We hear about it on the news, on the radio, on the internet, because they give shock value, because our brains are wired to look for the danger. Joy is not a threat to your survival. And the media is constantly shining the flashlight on everything terrible. But what happens is your brain assumes that's the correct percentage. And it's our job to daily shift our flashlight and remind ourselves, yes, there's bad in the world, but I can shift my flashlight and I can look at something else if I be intentional about it.
I love that. It goes with what I always say, your brain will always find what it's looking for.